Greetings, friends. It's me, Wayman, and this is a video response to Bible contradictions and Jesus cursing the fig tree by Brett Knucklebuster STR. I seen reference to this video out of Violently Graceful's video on the topic, and that was a very good video. Go check that out. But it got me thinking, and I'm not really worried about Bible contradictions, and I'll tell you why. And also I want to say that an apologist is nothing more than an evangelist disguised as a historian. So that's what I'm going to say about that. But I guess that one of the issues is when looking at the Gospels is how they were put together. And there's examples in Greek literature that can be looked at in the context of early Christian literature, meaning the writing style. So you had, first of all, the Gospels were never meant to be read all together, side by side. Each specific book was two different communities and read separately. So basically you had the idea or a core shell of what was supposed to happen, early Jesus community stories, and then these things were built and put together in epic and tragedy context. So when you're reading Luke, you're reading the tragedy of Jesus. Very Greek, and the Hellenization and Romanization very much influences how these texts were portrayed, along with Judaism, because these were Hellenized Jews writing these pieces of literature. So if you look at how the Greeks used Homer to make offshoots of mythology and plays, you can get a kind of idea on how the Jesus stories were built and composed. So they used Homer as a rough outline. One example would be the plays of Euripides, Rhesus, and when the war-raging Diomedes and the wily Odysseus go out on a night attack to the enemy camp in the Iliad, and they slice and dice one of the alliance's commanders that was helping the horse-breaking Hector. He's sleeping. They slice him up, take his armor, which was all gold, and they steal his beautiful, beautiful horses. So Euripides makes a play about this, Rhesus, and you can read that. And he kind of goes into detail, and there's probably other stories floating around, texts that we may have lost, we don't know. But whether the story was accepted or not was how believable they could make it. So in order to make a good play, it had to be convincing, and if it didn't follow the storyline that everybody knew about the Iliad and the Odyssey, it was pretty much either rejected or not received very well. So when you went to the festivals and they put on these plays, that would be how well it was done. Political message was put in, emotional messages were put in, and moral messages were put in. This was also done in the New Testament. So what I think currently is probably the most Jewish and least Hellenized text is Mark, which could have been, the core text. And then the specific communities added their own elements to it to create the tragedy or the epic of the Jesus. And so what you can do is forget about comparing everything. Everything doesn't have to match. Read the books separate. So read Mark every day for like a week. you know, then forget about it for a while. Then read Luke every day for a week. And then Matthew. Don't get them all mixed up. They were never meant to be compared with each other, because these were specifically to their own communities. So that's how I think it went down. So especially even tragedies built on the Iliad from Aeschylus. You can read Agamemnon, excellent story, and Orestes by Euripides and others. So we can glean a lot of information that was floating around about these ideas in mythology that we may have lost, but also the artists and the writers of plays and literature, even in the New Testament, was able to, as I said before, put in their own political and theological statements and modernized the moral and political statements for the audience, depending on what they were going through at the time. And one of the interesting plays following the Iliad that Euripides probably had a hard time pulling off was the play Helen. When you read that, I don't know how much of the audience would accept Euripides' idea of Helen in the Iliad being a phantom, while the real Helen was held by some other person. So go and read that, and read the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then read the Greek tragedies, and then think about it in light of New Testament Gospels and literary composition. Nothing really needs to match, and there was no theological push to have everything line up. Back then, they took great liberties at adding what they needed to bring about new mythologies and new ideas, and making statements, both politically, morally, and religious statements. So that's my view on it, friends. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Another thing I wanted to touch on, Marcus Borg, pretty good writer, makes a lot of these little books. In the last week talks about the fig tree. And from the fig tree lesson, fig tree learn its lesson. Basically, he says that Jesus expected to find food, but it's in between a temple incident. So the fig tree is symbolic of the Jewish temple. This is on page 35 of his books. Mark, in other words, wants hearers or readers to consider those two incidents together, so that what happened to the fig tree and what happened in the temple interpret each other. So you can take a look at that, read that a little bit more if you have this book. You might be able to find it someplace online, but it's like 13, 14 bucks. Maybe you could get the digital version a little bit cheaper, but there's no end to these little books. But they give out some pretty good information. So be well, friends, and take care. And remember, if everybody's thinking alike, then somebody isn't thinking.